Hello and welcome to the Church in Action program. This week we're starting part 1 of a 2-part series with Heidi and Rich Joy as we discuss how ministry leaders can become more like Jesus. We hope you enjoy.
Making disciples is the church's primary mission, and God uses the spiritual practices to transform us to be like Jesus. This week we're talking about disciple making with Heidi and Rich Joy of Breathe Ministry, which runs a retreat and care center in Connecticut. They also lead retreats and provide coaching and spiritual directors for pastors and pastoral couples. I'm Charles Galda, President of Vision New England, and your host for the Church in Action. Rich and Heidi, thanks for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Now you guys are yourselves a pastoral couple. And so can you give us a little bit of your background of how you became pastoral couple and then how you became somebody who cares for pastoral couples?
Sure. So in the late 80s, we were just regular people, having jobs, doing life, raising kids. And God put it on our hearts to start a church in our area here in Trumbull, Connecticut. It was just the two of us, and we planted that church early 90s. We put church together for 25 years. All the ups and downs and triumphs and challenges of leading a church. And then coming toward, I think about year 23 in that we were starting to feel like God was calling us to do something else. And he really put it on our hearts to, over the couple of years between 23 and 25, really put it on our hearts to start thinking about pastoral couples. Ministry is hard. It's hard on a marriage. It's hard on a family. And we knew from experience, the question of where does a pastoral couple go when they need help? If you're in a church and you need help, you go to your pastor or your, pastor's wife. But if you're a pastoral couple, who do you go to? Sometimes it's not safe to go to your church for help. You need safe people to go to. And so God really grew it in our hearts to want to help pastoral couples. So at year 25 in our journey of pastoring, we handed off our church and we launched Breathe Ministry. That was about 5 years ago.
And so any looking back?
Not really. I mean, we look back when it comes to drawing on our experiences, but not looking back with, I wish we were still doing that, especially during COVID. I was like, I'm so thankful I'm not pastoring a church right now. Those were some hard years.
And so you step out of that to care for pastoral couples, gives you the perfect mindset, right? With all the experience, what people have been through. So many of us have the outside view looking in of what it's like to be a pastor, but don't really appreciate all the challenges and nuances and the isolation that you can feel in it. Yeah. And so now, are pastors coming to you because that's what they're feeling? They're isolated or they're stuck, or is it something more natural as a next step in growth or something else?
I think a lot of pastors come and pastoral couples come, they're tired, they're worn out. There's, it's talk of chronic fatigue syndrome that especially after COVID and then moving out of COVID and not seeing church growth, they've seen church decline in a lot of places. So they're discouraged, defeated, really tired, needing a place to process what they've gone through and what they're going through currently. I think lately that's been more
it's an interesting journey how it's gone for pastors. COVID was hard on a lot of people, but really hard on pastors. And as I've been thinking about that lately, and one of the things that dawned on me, maybe I'm slow to the game here, but COVID really pushed against community. All of the regulations that came around COVID were directly opposed to holding community together. So many pastors had to ramp up what they were doing just to try to hold their community together and care. And we've talked to so many pastors who doubled down and worked so hard through COVID, which I'm, they're like heroes. I'm proud of them. So many of them kept their churches together, pastoral couples. But now that we're kind of off of that now, COVID's a little bit in the rearview mirror, and the pastoral couples are letting down now. They're like, we made it through, and realizing how exhausted they are. And sadly, some of them are considering just leaving the ministry because they're shot, they're worn out.
And then I think also just discernment in where they should go next.
Yeah.
A lot of pastors are considering, do I want to stay in the pastorate, or am I in the place where God wants me? Or where am I? So just some spiritual direction. And also it's been really encouraging because a lot of pastors are coming just to spend time to be and be with God, which we really believe is the most important thing for pastors and pastors' wives, is to recognize the need to slow and just be.
Yeah, and I'll just pile on with what they went through, because I agree with everything you said, but we also pick up on this thing of, and while I'm doing all that, I'm dealing with my own loss, that my parents may have died alone because no one could be there, or my children lost their jobs or their homes, or while I fought a two-front battle every day in my church about masks and vaccines and race and while people I thought were so committed and dedicated left and said nothing. After 20 years. And then people who I thought were dedicated and committed and mature left and said awful things. I wish they'd left and not said anything. Yeah.
Right. And many of them didn't come back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And so how much of that, though, goes to this issue of is a spiritual issue? Because part of it is, well, if your church shrinks, that's discouraging from a human perspective. But we always say we walk by faith, not by sight, and God is doing something important regardless of how many people I can see. And so is there a spiritual formation issue there, or is it just something else?
I think spiritual formation factors in. Pastors and pastoral couples work really hard. It's a two-edged sword, because so many of us are doers. We go into it because we want to care for people. We genuinely want to help. But sometimes it's hard to find the line where you need to stop. It's hard. I find pastors have a hard time finding their off switch.
Yeah.
So
overfunctioning. Doing what others could do. As a pastor and pastor's wife, sometimes they do way too much, and it hurts them and it hurts the community itself.
Right. So, COVID aside, under normal circumstances, we were just with a pastoral couple last week, spending some time with them. And he mentioned his typical days. He goes into the office early, 8 or 9 o'clock. He said, I'm there till 5. And he said, well, I don't really leave at 5. I hardly ever leave at 5. And then when I get home, there are emails and phone calls, and the demand just, it doesn't shut itself off.
Yeah.
So it's hard for pastors to turn that off and slow down and quiet their own spirit.
Yeah. And sometimes we lay people can have a consumer mentality or a entitled mentality of, but I want my pastor to do this, and I want his attention for this, and I want his help for this, and I want him to come, or her, and it's just not practical. Right. And but they feel the accountability because we impose it on them. And so we're some of that's their own wiring. I think you're right. Some of that's we're creating the system that compels them to, even in things outside their gifting.
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah. And to be totally honest, pastors, I'm going to call us out on this. Too often we like that. We like being the person that everybody goes to and everybody needs, and we have the answers, and we're the strong one. So there's a dark side to that too.
And I think that comes in with just the layperson in their normal life too, as well, because phones and the internet, your emails, you can always access work. So all of us need to close the computers, turn off the phones, and be with our families when we get home, and be with God. It's hard to do that when you have your phone, you're reading your Bible off of your phone, and all of a sudden you get, like a buzz because a text has come in, or an email from work has come in, or even from friends. Yeah. They could be good, but just learning how to be still and quiet, slow down, and turn off things around us.
One of the things we're really happy about, Charles, is we have some pastors who are coming to our place regularly just to do that. We had a pastor yesterday here for the day. He comes once a month. He comes in the morning, he stays till about 4 o'clock, and it's just his time to disconnect. He's away from the church. He's away from the office. It's quiet. It's peaceful here. We have another pastor coming today that stays for a couple of days. He does that monthly. And it's just for the purpose of what we would call spiritual disciplines of solitude and slowing and stillness. And sometimes you need a different environment to make that happen.
And so now I can hear some marketplace people saying, and that's where I come from, well, I don't ever get that. And what you just described of slow down and shut up, that is not the expectation my boss has,
Yes.
or my company has, or my customers have. Help speak to them. So I know we're talking about pastors, but speak to that too, please.
Okay,
Sure.
but let's wait, because you said the lay people, it's not the lay person in the church, nor often the elders or the deacons. It's not their impression that they want their pastor to go away and be still and be quiet. He hasn't done this, or this. So
Right.
it's like,
and I don't get that. Nobody, 30 years in the corporate world, nobody told me go take a day and right. And so are we thinking about it wrong?
I would say yes, because, the cliche phrase is we're not human doings, we're human beings. Whether you're a pastor or you're in the corporate world, you have a soul that needs to be cared for. And you can run it, 150 miles an hour. You can burn the candles at both ends, but you're eroding your soul when you do that. And your soul needs care. So I would say to that person who's not a pastor, who's in the corporate world, who's overfunctioning and overworking, or a workaholic, or totally overcommitted to their job, that you might be disregarding the important part of who you are inside of you that needs care. And you can't microwave that. You can't fast food that. That only comes through slowing down and tuning into what's going on inside of you. And so then if we're expecting our pastors to be caregivers to our souls, we have to make sure they're taking care of their own souls. A pastor with a worn out soul isn't in a place to give care to other people whose soul needs care.
yeah.
I would have said for years about what you just said is, I hear you, I accept that. It's just not practical.
Yes.
And I would move on. And I think I was wrong in that, is I need to say, well, wait a minute, maybe there are some trade-offs I need to make in life, because my Bible says, meditate on God's word day and night, devote yourself to prayer, right? And Jesus is modeling a life for us that does have periods of silence and solitude. Right? As a disciple, we're supposed to model everything in our lives on him. And I think I probably should have been saying, hey, maybe I'm not doing that, and maybe my priorities aren't right.
Right.
And I need to rethink some of that stuff. And I'm trying to rethink it even now that I'm in vocational ministry.
And I think, Charles, it's also a mindset to be interruptible. Jesus was interruptible. So he was, during our day, even in the corporate world or the busyness, I think leaders in the corporate world who have been really effective also are interruptible. They can listen to someone who has an idea, or take the time to care for an employee. Maybe not full out, but just spending the time to listen. And Jesus flowed that way. And our culture is actually the opposite. It's speed, speed, speed. I need to get everything done. I'll walk over people, but Jesus didn't live that way. So the spiritual practices of actually slow and not in a hurry is even difficult for me.
Yeah.
When I get to I was challenged years ago. We were at a conference and the speaker told us, when you get in the grocery line, pick the longest one. Do the exact opposite. Try driving the exact speed limit. That's like you're going,
there are some things that just aren't possible.
But it just reminds us how much of a hurry we live in.
Well, that's, John Mark Comer is getting a lot of traction with this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is based on Dallas Willard stuff. But it just exposes this, that young people are recognizing, because that's who he's really talking to. Young people are recognizing more than us who grew up in that system, that there's something not right in this.
Yeah.
And I do think that is part of what happened in COVID too. We talk about the super volunteers have not come back, or even volunteers have not come back. And I think they realized I was burned out, and I just didn't know it. I was exhausted. I don't want to go back to that again. So I'm staying out of it entirely. Because if I go in a little bit, I'm too deep, right? And so I think there's this recognition, even if we're not all putting the words you guys are putting to it, that there's something off in this, of this nonstop activity. And so I think maybe the people who are saying, well, I never got a sabbatical, I never took a day to go. I think the answer is probably maybe we should.
You should, right.
As opposed to you shouldn't, because I don't. It's maybe you should.
And also, yes, and also the recognition, though, Charles, that the pastor's wife are dealing with not only church issues, but as they're pastoring, they're dealing and relating with people who have life struggles. So our counselor, you could say just what Mike said one time
about how hard the job is.
Yeah, how hard the job is.
This was years ago. I was seeing a Christian counselor. He was wonderful, did great things for me. And somewhere along the way in my sessions, I said to him, Mike, your job it's got to be so hard because all you do is sit and listen to people's problems all day long. And, it must be, and he said, his response was, no, I think your job as a pastor is harder than mine. He said, I can listen to people's issues, but then when the hour's up, I go home. I'm done. Yeah. As a pastor, you don't go home. You're not done. You do life with the people in your church. So there's a whole nother layer to, you're trying to help and care for people, but you're also in relationship with them. Yeah. And it adds just another layer of demand on the pastoral couples,
while also running an organization.
Yeah, you have to be a CEO, you have to be a planner, you have to be a budgeter.
So it's a little bit different than normal corporate world, which is hard to understand unless you've been there.
Yeah.
But we've heard that from more people, that in being the lead pastor, even more so, that you just don't know what the lead pastor goes through. So associate pastors underneath will never understand that until they're in there, but trusting that the lead pastor has even more of a weight on him.
Yeah. Well, I think pastors also, by nature of their job and their wiring, they carry burdens for us.
Yes.
And those burdens don't go away because it's the end of the day.
Right.
And so when I hear somebody in the workplace, they've lost somebody in their family, I might pray for them and I feel bad, but I'm not there grieving with them and bringing them through that. And there's a burden on that. There's been a lot of that. And then I get to take my anger out on you. Right. So I'm not happy about something in COVID. So I'm going to take that out on you, despite us being friends. And we just create this dysfunction in the way we end up treating our pastors as a result of it, that we're seeing playing out over and over again, and plays into some of the data you guys were sharing about folks saying, well, maybe this isn't the right place for me, but I don't know where it is.
Right.
And we've seen, and I don't know if that's just, if this is more than normal or if it's just that I've been here, I've been seeing elders treat their pastors in shocking ways, that how we can profess to love people, anybody, let alone our pastor, and treat them the way some churches are treating their pastors, to me is just shocking.
Right. So that's why we feel like what we're offering, what we think God has called us to do is so important and so needed right now. Because I said earlier when we first started, if a pastor's struggling with his marriage, his family, if his wife is struggling, who do you go to? It's not safe to talk to people in the church often about what you're struggling with. The church, it just tends to go in one direction. It doesn't go in two. And what you're saying is sadly true, Charles. It's not safe for pastors sometimes to talk to their elder boards about it. That's where they should be able to go to their elders and say, I'm really struggling. And I know cases where this has happened and it's gone well, and the elders have come through and been wonderfully supportive of their pastors. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, a pastor goes to his elder board and says, I'm really struggling spiritually. I'm empty. I'm flat. And they flip out. Oh my gosh, our pastor's dying. And it blows back on him in a bad way.
Yeah.
So we have with Breathe, and this is not a plug for Breathe, but just that we have provided a place so people can't go to their elders or their church board and say, I need a break or I need to go for a retreat. They can contact us, and we have people that support us and will support a retreat for a pastor that doesn't feel comfortable going to their elders because they really don't want them to know how they're struggling.
Right. We just feel like, we provide a safe haven for people. Yeah. We're safe people. We're outside of the situation that the pastor's coming from, and they can come here and be safe.
And so if they come there, is there a standard offering that you guys have that if I come, you're going to do, or is it tailored to each person, or what does that look like?
Well, there was a standard when we first started. We were trained by Standing Stone in California, which is a great organization for pastors to know about. They will provide free shepherding, and
they're all over the country. That's a great organization.
It's a great organization. So so they had a very standard retreat that if we do a retreat for them, we follow. But we found that in New England and with the pastors that we're working with, that they really needed something a little bit different. I love Standing Stone. If you can do it, their retreat, definitely, go for it. But if not, ours follows, it's very tailored to the couple and what they're interested in. So whether it's from just dinner at our house just to talk with us, or it's a full-on retreat where they want some coaching and spiritual direction, or they just want to come here and not even interface with us, which happened with COVID. We had never thought about that, but this place has been a place of just quietness and peace and rest. And so it's awesome. It's just,
we have a separate entrance with a keypad lock and a separate section of our house. So we have some people who come here and they let themselves in and they have their time and they leave, and we don't see them. They just need to be alone. They need the rest. And then we have other people who, it's either a single pastor or a couple or a pastor's wife, and they come and they need us. They need someone to talk to or pray with. Sometimes, Charles, you just need someone who will listen to you, without judging or interrupting. And it really is tailored. It's custom to whatever the people need when they come here. We try to provide it.
And for the length,
and even the length. We have someone who comes for a day, someone who comes for 3. We have retreats that have been 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. It really depends on what people need.
And I do want to clarify something, because you mentioned it's at your house, and so I don't want people to think, oh, so somebody's sitting in your living room. It's, you've got a really pastoral setting, which is really pretty, but you've kind of taken I'll call it a wing of your house, not to make it sound like a mansion, but a wing of your house, and you've kind of closed it off into a separate environment and space with private exit, private entrance, and stuff like that. So folks can come for a very private, silent retreat and see no one if they arrange that with you.
That's exactly right, Charles. Thanks for clarifying that.
And so we've been talking a lot about the spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices and the role they play in our spiritual formation. Is that a big part of what you end up doing? Is that spiritual direction, or is that something different?
It does factor into what we're doing. Often when someone comes to us and they're hurting, there are several reasons why. There are spiritual reasons, but there are also relational reasons. Could be physical reasons, could be stress, could be emotional. Because we're whole beings. We're made up of all of those facets. On the spiritual side of it, though, we try to help people think about what they need spiritually, and it's different for everybody. Some people might just need the retreat getaway. Some people might need to put some spiritual disciplines in their life. So what we do, and this is spiritual direction, is we don't give all the answers. We just try to help people before God think about what they need to put in place in their life, what practices they need to put in. And honestly, the most common one we find is for pastoral couples is the need to slow down. We talked about that before. I don't want to go unpack all that again, but just to say that I think we find the most common one is the rhythm of work and rest. I was with a pastor yesterday morning. I meet with him monthly, and he's really trying, a younger pastor, he's really trying to learn the rhythm of work and rest and Sabbath in his life. And he just said, it's so hard. Everything works against that, and I'm fighting for it. And then he said this. He said, all of my peers, he's in like pastor groups, and he said, all the other guys I talk to, none of them are doing it. They don't know how. They don't know how to get this rhythm of work and rest. So that's one of the most common things we find.
Well, and one thing I've seen, I think this is pastors and we lay people too, and I wonder if we just make life so much harder than it needs to be. Mm-hmm. But I was talking to a guy up here in New Hampshire one day, and I was talking about Jesus's burden is light, and he goes, "But it's not." and I think the reality is we don't experience it as light because we're not modeling the life. We're not following the life Jesus modeled for us that it would be light.
Right.
We're trying to get our things done. And so much of what we do is we're owning the outcome. right? And I'm a corporate guy, I'm a metrics guy and all that, but metrics make you own the outcome.
Mm.
And so, pastor, we need to grow the church by 10% this year. It's like, we're owning something we can't own.
Right.
Right. God and the Holy Spirit have to do that. Pastor, we need to preach and make disciples in a way that glorifies God and is the best effort you can put into it. And we all are going to do together. That we can own. But as soon as we get to the metric of something we can see, by the way, another problem, but something we can see and an outcome, it's now I own all of the stress of making that happen. And in fact, I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a similar mindset, I love the disciplines. I think we do need to train ourselves, training rather than trying harder, study, reading the Bible, praying, fasting, all really necessary practices. Jesus had them all in his life. But the thing that concerns me sometimes about it is the way we could approach it is that becomes a new checklist.
We hope you enjoyed part 1 of this 2-part series. This program is created by Vision New England, which accelerates evangelism by helping the church make disciples, do justice, and foster unity so people want to know Jesus and New England will be transformed. You can find more resources and donate at visionnewengland.org. Thanks for listening. This program is brought to you by our friends at the Luis Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide. Stay tuned for part 2.